introduce Adam Tim as a presenter for this webinar. Adam is a training instructor and culture change consultant for the 911 industry. He shares proven tools that work. Adam spent over a decade as a 911 operator for the Los Angeles Police Department, where he pioneered a stress resilience program that contributed to a 45% decrease in sick time usage. After leaving the LAPD, Adam started his company, The Healthy Dispatcher, to bring tools for resilience to his challenging profession. So without further ado, take it away, Adam.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. And I just want to thank the whole Datamark crew for making this a possibility. I've been sitting at home for the last 2.5, 3 weeks now, when I'm usually on planes and going out to comm centers across the country. So this is a good alternative to get out into the country without actually having to get on a plane. And I get to practice social distancing as well. So thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who's tuning in right now. And for those of you who are going to be watching on the replay, awesome. I want to share some tools that changed my life as a dispatcher. And I know that they're particularly powerful during this time because there's more and more going on with COVID and emergency situations all across the country. But what I'm hearing from my friends at comm centers across the country is that this is just more business as usual, where we're trained to deal with this kind of stuff. So when we talk about self-care for dealing with crisis, the way I want to approach this is, how can we practice great self-care to keep doing the job that we love to do? Being in a heroic caregiving role, it's important that we practice self-care, because we can't give from a depleted state for too long. So what I would like you to consider, for you personally, what would you need to get out of today's session, this webinar on self-care, on boosting resilience, on dealing with the stress of the job, whether it's the day-to-day stuff that we deal with, whether it's working with tough callers, whether it's working with difficult field responders, difficult situations within the comm center. I find that a lot of the stress that we deal with in this profession has to do with the person sitting alongside of us for a 12-hour shift or a 16-hour shift if you're working mandatory overtime. So how do we keep it all straight? And then there's a pandemic on our hands. And what I found as I've crisscrossed the country over the last few years since I left the Los Angeles Police Department, I found that we're not very good at caring for ourselves. We're good at prioritizing everybody else's needs ahead of our own, whether that's our families, whether that's the communities that we serve, whether it's our work BFFs or friends at work or our coworkers or whoever. We're really good at caring for other people, not so good at caring for ourselves. So what do you need to get? What do you need to get from this session today to make it worth it for you to be here? You have taken time out of your busy schedule. You have taken time off the floor. If you're at work, you've taken time from doing whatever you're doing at home, if you're tuning in at home. I want to make this worth it for you to be here. So I'd like you thinking, as we go through this conversation, what you would need to get, what would you need to leave here with in order to make it worth it for you to be here? Because you know that the job is challenging. So I love that you're already thinking about what you can leave here with, and whether it's something for yourself, whether it's something for your team, whether it's something for your family. I find that there is absolutely a correlation between how we show up at work depending on things that are going on at home. Likewise, if you have a tough shift or you have stuff going on at work, it colors how you show up at home as well. So be thinking about it from all of these perspectives. What would it mean for you to take great care of yourself, to practice, dare I say, radical self-care? What would that mean for you, especially when the challenges of the job hit us. And I found that this job changes us. It changes the way we think about the world. It changes the way we think about people. It changes the way we perceive things. And what I found working in 911 for 10 years at the LAPD, which is one of the busiest centers in the country, I've found. We had 600 line level dispatchers at the time, about 60 supervisors. I found that I wasn't aware of how the job was affecting me. And as a result, I was taking my stress and aggression out on the world around me. And it wasn't until I increased my self-awareness to a certain point, and started practicing some of the strategies that we're going to be talking about today, that I saw that I was, in a lot of ways, the common denominator in many of my strained situations in my daily life, both on and off the phones, both on and off the radio, both in and outside of the comm center. So today what we're talking about is stress. I'd like you to consider this word. You certainly know that the dispatch role is stressful. You certainly know that you have experienced stress. You might have a baseline level of stress. It's like you have relegated yourself to just being in this chronically stressed state forever, and that's it. And I find that those who work in this profession, those who can handle this profession, are generally more resilient than the general population. I'm going to be talking a lot about this word resilience as we go through this conversation today. And the problem with knowing that you're more resilient than the general population is that when you see this word, stress, and people say, you got to take good care of yourself, being a dispatcher, that's stressful. You're dealing with people in their worst days. They're not calling you to thank you. They're not calling you to share the rosier side of the day. They're calling us when they need help. And we are exposed to a cross-section of the world that doesn't always look good or bode well for the communities that we serve. And if you say, well, it's just, stress is just the way it is, and there's nothing that I need to do about it, and my stress is fine. My stress is, I'm dealing with it. It's fine. If you, as a resilient 911 professional who could take on more than most, believe that you got your stress situation taken care of, and you have looked out into the world, and you people who are obviously stressed. Those are the people who are like running around like chickens with their heads cut off. They're the people who say they're like the Karens. I think that's I've seen that a lot on social media right now. The Karen who's calling in. These people are obviously stressed. If you say to yourself, well, if that's stress, run around with the chickens like a chicken with a head cut off, then I certainly got my stuff together. You are unlikely to do anything different tomorrow. If, however, you start to contextualize and become aware of the impact of acute stress, traumatic stress, and chronic stress on you, and you tap into the potential that there could be another way for you to feel better, to show up at 100% for what other areas of your life require something of you. That's a much more powerful perspective. It's a much more powerful way to look at how stress impacts you, or the things that cause you stress in your environment. Because as we start to gain perspective around the things that cause us to feel stress, we increase the likelihood that we can boost our level of resilience. What resilience is, it's certainly the art of bouncing back, as you can see on the slide here. Resilience is also the ability to bring your best on a consistent basis. It's the ability to roll with the punches. It's the ability to ride the waves of life and not get taken out by them. And I'm curious, what would it mean for you to be more resilient in and out of the job? And specifically what I'm asking you to consider is, what would it be like for you if you could experience less stress, both on and off the job? Why would that be important to you personally? And if you're really clear about what resilience means to you, meaning, for example, it could mean that after a tough shift, you can go home and better sleep at night. If you go home and you're not irritable, you're not on edge, you're not taking out your workday on the kids or the family, that's a powerful vision of resilience. If you can see what resilience means to you, if you can see why it's important for you personally to have less stress, both on and off the job, you're much more likely to do something differently with the information that we're talking about. So, what would it mean if, as a resilient person, you could see stressors you could see challenges not merely as things that get under your skin and things to be annoyed at, but you could see challenges as things that you can meet. Because you have overcome many, many, many challenges before. If you could commit to goals and roll with them, if you could, on a consistent basis, think positively, if you were more empathetic, if you were to take responsibility for the things that you can change and change them, if you stopped blaming yourself for the things that are not for you to blame, if you could also stop the blame game outwardly. That's one thing that I was a master at during my dark days, before I learned all of this stuff that we're talking about today. I was a master at blaming everybody else for the way that things were turning out for me. I was not focused on what I could control. And as a result, it made me a little bit angry. This is a picture of me at about the 7-year mark of my career as a dispatcher for the LAPD. When this picture was taken, I was suffering from all of the attendant effects of daily chronic stress. I had tension headaches and migraines. I had an ulcer, regular indigestion. In fact, I was waking up in the middle of the night during these days with indigestion so bad that I couldn't sleep. And I would go to the medicine cabinet and guzzle Pepto-Bismol so I could go back to sleep. And I didn't know why I was in this state. It wasn't until things got really, really bad for me that I realized that I needed to do something differently. And I remember this breakdown week. It was a 1-week period where I had completely broke down. And leading up to this 1-week breakdown period, I had gotten my 3rd complaint. I have 3 sustained citizen complaints working on the non-emergency lines at LAPD. I had a tough time, not with non-emergency calls. I had a tough time with, I didn't have a tough time with emergency calls. I felt like 911 calls were my opportunity to do what I signed up to do, help people, make a difference. I had a tough time with the non-emergency calls placed by a population who believe they have an emergency. Like my 8-year-old won't obey the house rules. Like the ice cream truck is too loud. Can you have them move down the street? Like the neighbor kids are playing ball in the street. They might hit my car. I found out the hard way that the words that I chose, the tone that I used, determined to a great deal whether or not these non-emergency callers hung up in a huff, called back, and asked to speak to my supervisor. I was never more embarrassed than when I was sitting in the complaint review room with my watch commander, who was a sergeant or a lieutenant, my immediate supervisor, and the tape. I found that the tape never lied. I could always hear my discourtesy. I could always see that I was in the wrong. Interesting thing that hindsight is 2020, right? Why couldn't I see that I was in the wrong in the midst of being wrong? Well, pride, ego, perfectionism. You know the right way. You do it the right way, and you know what's the right way, and all of these things were going through my head. As I said, at the 7-year mark, my way didn't work. And it was about that time that I took a stress reduction class. A friend of mine said, hey, there's this class. You can learn how to relax, and you might get something out of it. And I was looking for some way out of my stressful condition. So I signed up, and that 6-week class changed my life. I learned the tools that we're talking about today. And I saw that I had a lot more control over my day-to-day happiness than I let on. As I said, during the first 7 years of my career, I blamed everybody else. I blamed the callers for being so stupid. I blamed my coworkers for being so lazy. I blamed my supervisors for gunning for me, overlooking the fact that I was giving them ample ammunition, overlooking the fact that I was the lazy coworker. I was the person riling callers up and getting them into a state where they felt like they couldn't talk to me and had to ask for a supervisor. I was doing that. And when I finally took ownership of my role in all of this, things shifted very quickly. And within 6 months, I was a completely different person, yet I was still working under the headset. And I worked under the headset. I worked at the LAPD for 3 more years after I made that transition. And I started doing training classes like this. I started a stress reduction program at the dispatch center. I wrote a book about it. My first book is called Stress is Optional, How to Kick the Habit. And I started to basically give from this state of things were bad for me, and I just want to help others see that they don't have to be so bad. And it was sometime in the last 3.5 years of my career at LAPD, before I left to launch the Healthy Dispatcher, that one of my coworkers came up to me and she said, "Adam, I don't know what you did, but you are so much easier to be around. Back then, we were calling you Angry Adam behind your back." I was Angry Adam behind my back to the population of my 600 coworkers. When I learned that, I was appalled, because I'm from small town Minnesota, and I thought that I was still this kind, nice Midwestern person. I was very surprised to find that my perception of me was very different than others' perception of me. I didn't know at the time that I was going up in flames, and I was not doing any of my coworkers any favors. So I say all of this, not to belabor the point, but to say I was in a bad way. And at the 7-year mark, I kicked my burnout. I learned that there was a difference between good stress and bad stress. And I love this graphic that we're looking at right now, because it sums up perfectly what we're talking about. On the y-axis, we have performance. On the x-axis, we have pressure or stress level. You'll see that to a point, as pressure or stress increases, so does your performance level. And this green zone, the stress psychologists call it eustress. I call it good stress. That's where focus, motivation, creativity resides. You have likely experienced good stress working a console, when you're getting all the broadcasts, when you feel the adrenaline rush. Many of us who work in this profession are adrenaline junkies, and you feel like the activation of the fight or flight response tunes you up and has allowed you to perform at a higher level. You'll see there's also such thing as too little stress or underload or boredom. So resilience is about being able to dwell in the optimum band of good stress or eustress, the green zone there. Because what happens when we cross over the peak into distress or bad stress, we start to see some of these symptoms of exhaustion, anxiety, panic, anger, overload, and burnout. And the job, if we're not careful, can easily overwhelm our normal coping abilities. And it might not happen in a year. It might not happen in 3 years. It might not happen until 20 years down the road. But what we do each day in a proactive way is going to allow us to have awareness of where we're at with regards to our own personal stress situation, and B, with that awareness, take action. And it's so important, especially when we're dealing with things like the current pandemic, especially when we're dealing with critical incidents. Someone in the Q&A field talked about you've seen several critical incidents lately. How do we notice how critical incidents affect us? Some of us are really good at just sucking it up, and we have in public safety in general a strong suck it up culture. Maybe you've noticed the negative effects of continuing to just suck it up and pushing on through till tomorrow. at some point, there is a diminishing returns of the suck it up perspective. A lot of this could be alleviated by having a willingness to step outside of our heads and ask for help and talk to people and talk to the people next to us. What I'd like you to do is look at this list here. It says the effects of stress on the body. And specifically what these are the chronic effects of stress, the effects of the chronic production of cortisol and adrenaline on the body. So cortisol and adrenaline are some of the stress hormones. They're the most problematic. The stress response has not evolved, or the body has not evolved to have a stress response that is always on. And when it is always on, when we're always stressed about the callers, childcare, healthcare, coronavirus, when we're always in this activation of the stress response, adrenaline and cortisol, the stress hormones, become toxic to the body systems. And we start to see how all of the body systems, from our brain, from our mental functions, to our cardiovascular system, to our immune system, to our digestive system, everything begins to break down in time. Using this list as a guide, I'd like you to highlight what are some of the signs. That's what the symptoms of chronic stress are. They're signs that you have been too stressed for too long. Using this as a guide, what are some of the signs and symptoms that you see for you that you've been too stressed for too long? So these are some of the physical symptoms. Some of the mental symptoms include the mood issues, include being highly irritable, include being very quick to anger. My nickname as Angry Adam was accurate. I snapped at coworkers, I snapped at callers, I snapped at supervisors. I didn't know that it was telling me something. This irritability, I didn't know it was telling me something about my stress situation. Now, I love saying that these symptoms of chronic stress are merely signposts pointing us in the direction of much needed change. What I found after taking this 6-week stress reduction class at the 7-year mark was that by dealing with my stress, all of these went away. My anger and irritability went away. My concentration problems, my sleep issues, my headaches. I had daily tension headaches and migraines. They went away. My ulcer went away. My blood pressure came back to a healthy level. What tends to happen in the modern age is we wrongly associate these symptoms of chronic stress as simply the way things are. And then we go to the doctor, and the doctor says, oh, you got high blood pressure. Here's some drugs for your high blood pressure. Oh, you got high cholesterol. Here's some drugs for your high cholesterol. And you say to the doctor, well, how long do I have to take these? And the doctor says, well, this is your life now. We tend to adjust to the rising pressure of our everyday life. And we take on more and more and more until something happens. And it doesn't have to be a cataclysmic health malady. Although if you've worked in this profession for any length of time, you have seen people succumb to stress-related illness or disease. For me, I was getting in minor fender benders all the time because I was not paying attention to where I was. I was so focused on where I was going. So let's get into some of the triggers that we see on the job. And I would love you to tell me, what are some of the, one second. Someone asked, what was the last symptoms? The last symptom on the bottom of the page there. It just says lower bone density. The studies have shown that osteoporosis and arthritis is made worse by activation of the stress response, because the stress hormones cause the aches and pains and even the skeletal system to begin to break down. So let's talk a little bit about some of the common workplace stressors. And I see these so often in comm centers all across the country. Certainly there's the physical discomfort of sitting for long periods of time. Did you know that multitasking takes a toll on the body and the mind? Did you know that, especially for you perfectionists, I know that disorganization probably drives you crazy. And then there's the interpersonal conflict. I find that at the better comm centers in this country, they are way better at navigating interpersonal conflict and communicating with each other than the other comm centers. I do find, though, as a general rule, that for being in quote unquote communications, we sure aren't very good at communicating with each other. Laura, thank you so much for sharing that being more resilient would mean a more fulfilling life outside of the job, feeling healthier. And that's such a powerful vision, because I find that we are so busy working. We work, that we don't take time for ourselves. And some of the signs, one of the biggest signs that you have likely been given that you are due to take some time for yourself is you frequently react. You go with your knee-jerk reaction instead of taking time and space to respond to situations and circumstances. If you are highly irritable, if everything drives you crazy, it is reflective of your stress situation. So what can you do with that? What can you do with that knowledge, with that information? Because William James says this. William James says the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. Now, this is a deceptively simple, I mean, it's a powerful statement, but it's deceptively simple, because if you say, I'm feeling really stressed, and I say, don't worry, just choose other thoughts. You might get frustrated. You might punch me in the face, depending on how you're feeling. Because so often we can't even see the thoughts that propel us ever forward. They're just the lens with which we see the world. And we may even be at empty and not even know it. I'd like you to consider, what are some of the signs that you have given from a depleted state for too long, that you would do well to give back to yourself? What are some of those signs for you? What are some of the triggers that cause you to do things that you'd rather not do? Maybe you stress eat. Maybe you self-medicate. Maybe you have other escapist tendencies. What's your sign? What's your symptoms of being at empty? With this awareness, we can do something different. And what I'd like to offer you is the opportunity to commit today to yourself, to commit to your self-care, to commit to prioritizing you on another level. So often in this profession, we say self-care is selfish. As a heroic caregiver, we frequently put ourselves last. And we say, well, I'm doing it for the family. Well, I'm doing it for my coworkers. Well, I'm doing it for fill in the blank. The challenge with that is we cannot continue to give in the way that we want if we don't give back to ourselves. So I want to give you four practices that you can incorporate into your daily life. And these are daily practices when we're dealing with crisis, when we're dealing with critical incidents, when we're dealing with tough stuff in and out of the comm center. It helps to have structure. And so what I want to share with you are a few strategies that you can use that fit into these four categories. If on a daily basis you move, you nourish yourself, you connect, and you be, or you allow yourself to be. So you're practicing physical activity, eating more healthy, engaging in social support, and using proactive measures to reduce your stress, you will rise to the challenge of any crisis, of anything that comes your way, because of the work that you have done beforehand. That's what being in this kind of proactive state allows us. We become more ready to overcome the things that we can't even know yet are coming our way. That's what resilience is all about. I love this quote. If you were to commit to any one specific thing in each one of these categories each day, and just close the door on backing out of your self-care practices, meaning like you commit today to moving at least once a day, making one healthy eating choice, connecting with someone through social support, and managing your stress, doing one thing in each area each day. And you say, this is my commitment to me, and I'm not going back on myself. If you commit at 100%, this stuff is easy. The problem is we commit at 98, 99%. And the quote that I love, which I was getting to, is 100% is easy. 99% is damn hard. Because if you commit at 99%, that means you still have that wiggle room. You still allow yourself a quote unquote cheat day. You still allow yourself to watch another 5 episodes of your favorite show on Netflix. What would happen if you closed the door on the old way? So I'm asking you, commit at whatever level you're able to today. So let's get into these 4 things very quickly. We don't have much time, but I want to give you something to use in each one of these areas. So when it comes to physical activity and moving, what I will say is this: meet yourself where you are at. We live in a body that you must move it or lose it. That is just the way it is. And you might say, that's easy for you to say. You don't work under the headset any longer. You're not sitting for 16, 18 hours a day. And hey, I get it. Yes, it's easier said than done. However, it doesn't take heroic striving effort to tap the power of exercise. Just taking a 10-minute walk each day is enough to bring some, I was going to say satisfaction, but sure, satisfaction, but also to bring some oxygen to the brain, and oxygenate the blood, and to feel like you're doing something. In fact, there was a study done where they had a sedentary control population do no exercise for 21 days. They had another group do 10 minutes of brisk walking twice a day for 21 days. The group that did 10 minutes of brisk walking twice a day for 21 days tested at aerobic fitness level 10 to 15 years younger than the group that did no exercise. So if you haven't exercised much in the last 6 to 12 months, you don't have to sign up for a gym pass. I mean, I guess the gyms are all closed out here in California, so that's not even an option now. So you're going to have to get creative with it. Just getting outside and doing anything can help. The benefits of exercise on mental health are so many. They've found that exercise reduces stress levels, it increases energy levels, it reduces depression, increases mood, reduces anxiety, increases self-esteem. And you might say, no, duh, I know all of this. Then what we have to do is address why we're not getting more activity, why we're not moving as much as we should with the stress of the job. It has to do with sitting at the console for hours and hours on end, and then just being so checked out at the end of the day that we can't muster up any strength or willpower to put on the shoes and go for a walk at the end of the day. So knowing that we are creatures of habit, what could you do starting today to introduce more movement? And that could be just a 10-minute walk. So before you relax at home after a shift, or before you rush off to work, get up 15 minutes earlier. What we have to see is the benefit of not doing something different from the movement perspective. We also have to nourish ourselves. We tend to eat a certain type of diet. They call it the dispatcher diet. Maybe you have been guilty of this. It's called the stress promoting diet. If you just make one shift with regard to eating less of the stress promoting diet and eating more of the stress reducing diet, you will feel better about yourself. I had a buddy who was drinking 5 20-ounce quenchers of Coca-Cola each day, and obviously that's a lot. And he just stopped doing that and lost 15 pounds in a month just by stopping eating the sugary sodas. And that's, so there's the weight thing when it comes to eating the dispatcher diet. Also, there's the energy thing, and then there's the diabetes and the health effects. This is a stress promoting diet. Yeah, it tastes good. Yeah, you deserve it. But it's stress promoting because we're not putting nutrients back into our body. The activation of the stress response requires a ton of energy. It requires a ton of nutrients. Vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin K, all nutrients that we are not putting back in the body when we gravitate towards a highly processed food diet. So what I'd like you to consider is, what's one shift that you could make today with regards to nourishing your body? So what's something from the stress promoting diet that you could eat less of? Just one shift. I'm not talking about heroic striving effort here, just one simple shift. And then pulling something from the stress reducing diet, which is fresh foods in general. Drinking more water is fine. Drinking more or eating more slowly is fine. When you can. I know that if you're working a console, you have to inhale your food. That's why it's so much more important when you're not under the gun, or you're not taking calls or fielding radio broadcasts, that you take time to actually smell your food and chew your food. Because here's the rub. You probably heard this statement: you are what you eat. I love this, the total picture here. The cells of the body are continually replacing themselves with whatever you are putting into your body. And only you know if you would do well to nourish your body in a different way. The next thing is we're talking about connection, and specifically engaging in social support. We have a tendency in this profession to keep everything to ourselves. We think people just won't understand. We also don't want to be seen as weak. And slowly but surely, we are stopping this stigma. There's a stigma around the mental health challenges, the mental and emotional challenges that we experience in a life as a first responder. And anytime you are willing to turn to the person next to you, who you know has just taken a tough call or has worked a critical incident, and you say, "Hey, I just want to let you know that if you ever need to talk to anybody, I am here for you." Just that, you can be a lifeline for somebody, because the effects of untreated PTSD are affecting our 911 centers in a much larger way than we ever imagined. In fact, a 2015 study by Dr. Michelle Lilly found that in this population, there was about 900 dispatchers in this study. They found that the percentage of dispatchers in the study that were experiencing some form of PTSD symptoms was a range between 18 and 24%. And we're likely not seeking treatment because we don't want to be seen as weak. So we have to be willing to, especially if we're feeling underwater, we have to be willing to open up. And I know that when we are willing to open up and we are willing to ask for help, we get the help that we need. I have never seen anyone cast out of their comm center, or cast out of their family, or cast out of their friend group for asking for help. I have for help take their own life. Friends of mine who work in 911. And that's tragic to think that someone in our family, our big 911 family, feels like they have nowhere else to go. Because there's someone working alongside of you. There's someone working alongside of you who can help and can be a confidant can be someone who you can turn to. Anessa, I love your question. Any tips for dealing with the naysayers or people that hinder you from taking care of yourself? So there are people who can help, and there are people who can hinder our progress. And I say what I had to do when I made the transition, in order to make the transition from being angry Adam to something different, I had to stop hanging out with the naysayers. I had to stop listening to the negative Nellies and the pissy Petes. What I couldn't do was wait until everybody got on board with a change. What I had to do was make a change for myself. And so I put it back on you and where you're at. What would it mean to be so committed to you, so committed to your health, so committed to your happiness that the naysayers just found somebody else to bother? Like I knew that in order, especially when I was just starting to practice what I now preach, I guess, if you want to use that term, I knew that I had to protect my happiness because if I didn't, I was going to get sucked back into the drain, the swirling drain of death. So, what do you need to do to prioritize your headspace, to protect your positive vibrations in order to create lasting and sustainable change? That's the best way to think about this. And one of the things that prevents us from engaging in social support, that prevents us from taking the high road, which is, in my perspective, the optimist, the road of the optimist, the road of positivity, is that over time, we become less empathetic. Over time, we become less able to withhold judgment, to consider others' emotions and take other people's perspectives. In fact, our success in our role as a dispatcher is conditioned by how quickly we make snap judgments based on limited information. Maybe you've had the unfortunate experience of making a snap judgment or making an assumption that you later found out was incorrect. Judgment and assumptions are the barrier to being empathetic, both with ourselves and with others. So the key part of engaging in social support and connecting with others is empathy. And I'm curious, what mindset do you tend towards? Do you tend towards it's always cloudy, the half empty perspective, or it's always partly sunny, with the it's threatening a sunshiny day, which is the half full perspective? We all have an opportunity to make the positive shift and be better at being a hub for connection and social support. And these are 4 really interesting reasons why making the positive shift matters, especially when it comes to social support. Research shows that happy people are more likely to engage with others and be more social. Happy people are less likely to have conflicts with others and are better at negotiating differences. Happy people may be more kind and helpful towards others. Certainly they are seen as that, and other people find it rewarding to be with happy people. I find that many heroic caregivers are really good at prioritizing others' needs. So making the positive shift matters for others as well, not only on the job, but outside of the job. I'm curious, is your attitude worth catching? It's a great question. So the final part of this is taking more time to simply be yourself, which is really about stress reduction, because stress affects all of these areas. It affects our emotions, our behavior, our mental state, how we feel physically in the body. Stress affects our emotions, which affect our behavior. So as become more aware of how our stress situation is affecting our emotions, which affects our behavior, we get to interrupt this stream. We get to catch ourselves in the thought loops, in the bad habits. And what I'm asking you to do is to draw a line in the sand today, whatever that means for you. Where are you ready to draw a line in the sand so that you can prioritize less stress and more resilience? One of the very best ways that you can reduce your stress levels is to simply connect with the breath. Try that right now. I'd like you to just notice, where are you breathing? Are you breathing in and out of the mouth? Are you breathing in and out of the nose? How are you holding your body? So connecting with the breath allows us to also connect with how we're holding tension in the body. How is your posture? We hold our stress in our body posture. We tend to slouch and roll our shoulders forward and tense up our shoulders. That's a stressed body posture. Using the breath to connect to how you're feeling in the body can help. There's a powerful breathing practice called box breathing. I love this, and you could try this right now. So box breathing is also called tactical breathing. It's something that the Navy SEALs use to manage their stress before going into a forward area. I have had dispatchers take this practice out of my 8-hour stress class and use it while working a critical incident, use it after a tough shift, before powering up their car and driving home, while sitting at home. And it is simply this: you breathe in to a count of 4, you hold to a count of 4, you breathe out to a count of 4, you hold to a count of 4. And you do this ideally for 4 minutes, but you could do it, if you're in a bind, for just 4 cycles. And research shows that this turns off the stress response. It reduces anxiety. It ushers in greater feelings of calm and more headspace so that you can maneuver. Another great way to reduce your stress levels is to celebrate yourself more often. And really what this is all about is having more fun. When was the last time that you really had fun? And I'm not talking about like laughing cynically at other people's misfortune. And I'm not talking about the chronic gallows sense of humor that we're prone to in this profession. When was the last time you really got into a state of joy, into a state of play? For those of you who have small children, you probably notice that they laugh, play, and have lots of fun all the time. That's one thing that we forget to do as we grow into our crusty adult selves. We forget to laugh and play. What's something that you might be able to do for you this week to celebrate yourself? I had the good fortune of starting to notice in the last 3 years of my time working at LAPD, started to notice that there were some of my coworkers who maintained consistent positivity. And I began to use them as an example for what was possible. And one of my friends, she retired after 37 years as a frontline telecommunicator, and she did every single day with a smile in her voice and a smile on her face. And she knew something that I didn't know. And it wasn't that her life was all sunshine and rainbows. It was that each day she made the choice. She made the choice to prioritize her own happiness. Now, someone said here, we should purge the negative people in our lives as we do our closets. Thank you, Laura. I absolutely agree. It's much easier to maintain consistent positivity and optimism if you're careful about who is on your bus. Those are the people who are on your bus are the people that you spend the most time with, or you give the most headspace to. Is your bus a party bus, or is your bus filled with naysayers, filled with negative people? I had to get out of a toxic relationship at home before I started to right the ship of my life and started to move away from being angry at him. And that was tough for me because I felt like a good person always said yes. A good person always sacrificed a piece of myself for the piece of the situation. What I learned is that I needed to start saying no more often. One of the things that we would all do very well to say no to more often is the overthinking trap. For those of you who are overthinkers, I'm curious, have you ever noticed what happens to your stress levels when you are stuck overthinking? Have you ever noticed what happens to your happiness levels? There's an inverse correlation. So noticing how stress makes you overthink, or noticing what you do when you're stuck in these thought traps, can help. Writing in a journal can help interrupt the thought stream. Getting exercise can help interrupt the overthinking trap. Also, fighting the always on mode. Specifically, what I'm talking about here is digital distractions. How prone are you to digital distractions? Powering down, like putting your phone on airplane mode, can help a lot. It can also help with regard to sleep hygiene. Practicing good sleep hygiene is a great way to reduce our stress levels. This can include having a nightly sleep ritual. This can include powering down electronics an hour before you're about to go to sleep. Not drinking coffee before going to bed, being careful about how much alcohol you drink. Notice the things that disrupt your sleep, and notice where you can make some adjustments. Another great way to reduce stress and just simply be more in gratitude is to practice gratitude, to write down the things that you're grateful for. A bunch of studies, a few minutes each day, and writing down 3 things to 5 things that you're grateful for turns the volume up on the things out in your field of awareness that bring you joy, that bring you gratitude, and it reduces stress levels. So I'm curious, what's an action that you can take today? What's one specific action that you can take today to prioritize you, to proactively manage your self-care? Because as you turn or push that one domino, it leads to others. And I am a testament to to the fact that it does not take a lifetime to back out of a lifetime of conditioning. I was 30 years old when I took that stress reduction class, and it took about 6 months to leave that old way behind. So what can you do today to move, nourish yourself, to connect, and to be you? So we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity during this very difficult time to double down on our self-care practices so that we can show up more in service, so that we get to do more of what we're here to do, which is to make a difference, to help people. And to take advantage of this opportunity, it helps to keep into focus your why. Why do you do the work that you do? If it's for your family, awesome. If it's to make sure that the field units come home safe at night, great. If it's to help the person on the other end of the line, awesome. Keep your why in mind, because it can help you persevere these challenging times. Because here's the thing, everything is connected. How you think, how you feel, your environment, how you behave, how you feel in your body, how you treat your body. And we all have a choice. We all have a choice of which path we get to take. So if you decide that you pick up a couple of the tools that we talked about here today, and you begin to apply these tools, and you blaze a new pathway, at some point, as you blaze this new pathway, you will find that you have reached an impasse because the thicket is too heavy and you can't keep going. The temptation at this time will be to get off the path that you're blazing and jump back on your old worn pathway. But I would encourage you to continue to blaze that trail, because it gets easier with time, because you know which direction your old pathway will take you. You've been walking it for some time. So I want to know, we have like a minute here, if there were any questions that I didn't address If anyone has any questions, you can throw them in the Q&A. There are some other questions here. I would love to hear from a few of you in the Q&A field right now. What's one specific action that you can take today to prioritize your self-care so that you can be more resilient in the face of the challenges that we face every day? Please throw something up in the Q&A field. What's something that you are going to do today to either nourish, move, connect, or be? Stop eating the quarantine snacks. Thanks, Latoya. Detach from digital devices. Thanks, Julie. Despite the cold, I'm going outside. Awesome. Take a walk after work. Drink more water. Overthinking, Audrey. Absolutely. I'm right there with you. It's a huge issue. Tactical breathing, box breathing. Great. Going to move, connect with my dispatchers. Just make the positive shift. Criselda, awesome. Working out at least 30 minutes a day. That's fantastic. Make time to breathe. Yes, yes, yes. These are all so fantastic. You guys, this is just overwhelming. The stream is just lighting up. So the last step is for you to do it. The last step is for you to take action. Please, 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 for the sake of the communities that you serve, for the sake of your families who count on you, take great care of yourself. And if you would like to have a resource with you, this is my book, Dispatcher Stress. It's available on Amazon. Also, connect with me on any of the social feeds. That's my Facebook handle, Twitter handle, Instagram. And if you have any questions about anything that we talked about, please send me an email directly. If you enjoyed this webinar, when the replay comes out, share it. Tell the folks that you work with that you picked up something interesting, and if you find something that worked for you, just share it. That's the one guiding principle that has made such a difference in my life, is that I started out doing this because I wanted to help people. I wanted to I don't know. I wanted to make the job easier for those who I work with and worked for, and to this day, that's what guides me. I just want to thank you all for being with me for this last hour. I am kind of lost not being out at the PSAPs, not being out in the comm centers. I've been home for the last 2.5 weeks, which is crazy. Last year I traveled 300 days and I was supposed to be at conferences and classes all the last 2 weeks and in the next 7 weeks, and they've all been postponed or canceled. So this is just a great opportunity. Stephanie, thank you so much for your help. And again, thanks for everyone for being on this call. And please, please, please let me know if I can ever be of service. I'm at your disposal.
All right, Adam, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Up next, we have a 30-minute presentation with Anthony Puzo from Esri on dashboards during coronavirus. We hope to see you there. Thank you, everyone, and hope you have a great week.